Jack, welcome to Talk Satellite.
Hi, Kevin. It's a pleasure to talk to you again.
Pleasure to hear you too, Jack. Okay, so geocentric providers, would you say this segment of our industry is the main one being hit by shrinkage in the market?
Yeah, I mean, clearly you've seen the news reports about the geocentric modem providers, and they're all having difficulty because they ramped up their capacities and everything to a higher volume and everything flattened out. And even XipLink, right? We've been tied to Geo for some time with our accelerator product, and those revenues have flattened out. So yeah, there's undeniable flatness in the market. So the real question is what happens next?
We do hear that some customers are coming back to Geo. What are your thoughts on this, and how will the other LEO constellations perform that are coming online?
Yeah, for sure. Some of the applications are coming back to Geo, typically as a mixed hybrid network where you might have Geo overlaid on top of LEOs for consistent delivery of services. I think a good example is the airline business. Most of the big ones have announced some sort of hybrid capability where they would have LEOs and GEOs, and that's important because you need continuous service around the globe, and there's certain congestion points in the LEO constellations that are available. So some of that traffic is coming back, and Earth observation and direct-to-device all utilize some form of GEOs, and so that market allows for a little bit of a rebound once people sort things out. The market definitely, as new LEO providers come into the picture, are going to offer higher capacities and diverse routing, something we're very involved in, right? Bonding different connections together. And I do think you'll see these networks of multiple LEOs. And when the customer has to have, 100% uptime, they'll have multiple paths over multiple LEOs with an aggregation device like a XipLink SD-WAN system in order to take advantage of multi-path and high uptime. So I do see that happening. It's exciting that Amazon is floating their systems today and aggressively testing those, and that's going to be, a game changer. And I think a couple of years from now, you'll see many networks that are multiple LEO networks bonded together.
So what type of providers do you see the market ultimately turning to?
Yeah, I do think it'll be a wide variety. In traditionally looking backwards in the geo market, you had major integrators like Marlink and Speedcast and those kind of folks that put everything together for customers, and they still do, of course. And now looking forward with new classes of service with LEOs and high-speed cellular data integrated with those, I think you're going to see more kinds of channels bubble up. Shipping management companies, for instance, might do their own integration, or as the simplicity of the systems become easier and easier, then the IT departments of companies themselves could take control of the integration effort. So I think you'll see a more fragmented market a little bit. And despite the fact that the LEOs are all closed kind of networks, they're sold directly by the manufacturers, it'll be a component to an IT infrastructure purchase, and that will have multiple sources. Smaller VARs, larger sales of the actual LEOs, but the VARs will put the LEOs together in certain configurations along with cellular data, and that will be an emerging side. I think that's really closer to the IT model of most of the enterprise kind of customers today, where the IT department takes more control and relies a little bit less on the really big integrators. So I think that'll be a pretty big market change over the years. And the large satellite operators in our business that are adopting mixed networks like GEOs, MEOs, and LEOs together, I think are going to be very successful. They're already retooling a lot of their service networks to accommodate multiple orbit types.
So XipLink, how will you address the market technology-wise as it's transforming?
We've been getting ready for this transformation for a few years now. And obviously we knew LEO was coming and multipath networks. Of course, in the old days, we bonded many geo connections together. So now we've extended our capability into bonding into LEOs and MEOs, cellular data, and so forth. Yeah, so we see that multi-orbit market evolving. Our geo-related revenues, as I mentioned earlier, are a little flat, but we have seen an uptick in our multi-orbit SD-WAN revenues, and that's really our future, and we're excited about that. So we have some production networks. These aren't trials anymore. They're actually moving multi-orbit from trials in the lab into actual production networks. We've got one very good customer we've had for many years, Telenor Maritime, that has integrated LEOs and GEOs together very successfully for both traditional maritime and also for unmanned UAV vessels that they can control remotely. And so that's a really good example of a production hybrid network that's been in place for quite some time. We also, as you may know, announced a cloud service called XipNet about a year and a half ago, and we've been in production for about 1 year. We have some very interesting customers there that are using multi-orbit, multiple LEOs in one case, multiple GEOs for an international naval customer that we have, and they've got OneWeb and Starlink and traditional GEOs integrated in both what's called a red and a black network, right? A secure and unsecured network. And that's been in place for about a year now. And that's pretty exciting. They've been very happy with the crew welfare aspects of that for the more open network, and using high-end encryption devices for the military. They've been able to actually even put the secure traffic over our network and combine those in one bandwidth pool over a worldwide cloud network. So we've been excited to watch this happen, moving from multi-orbit networks and trials and labs into actual production networks.
Okay. So how about vertical applications? Any particular area that you're having success or looking for to increase your success?
Yeah, we keep track of certain verticals where we have traction. And probably the most interesting one is that government and military networks have moved from roughly 20% of our revenues to over 50% of our revenues. And a lot of that is on the strength of international military and government, where they don't necessarily have unique encryption standards, right? They take advantage of IPsec and standard encryption technology. We have that built into our system so that you can both optimize and encrypt the data. In a normal circumstance, if you encrypt the data, it takes away the optimizations, but we have the ability to first do the optimizations and then apply the encryption, and that results in a higher throughput network. And so that's one example. Cell backhaul network is still strong. We have some very good customers. There's a couple major satellite operators that use us for cellular backhaul, and you'll be hearing some news very shortly on a real major multi-orbit win there. And we have our traditional customers, like AT&T, for instance, that use us for disaster recovery purposes, and they're going strong. And they're also looking at LEO-style networks to augment their existing system.
Yeah, it's quite a pivot to government, isn't it? So ZipNet Cloud System, as I remember, that was released just about a year ago, I think. How is all that playing out business-wise for you?
Yeah, that's playing out. I think the key is the business model is quite a bit different than our regular model. We typically sell software licenses in our technology business that are perpetual, meaning you buy a license and it's utilized on a server for the lifetime of that server. The cloud business of ZipNet is really a monthly service paid yearly. And so it's very low cost of entry for the customer. They don't have to worry about installing SD-WAN software. They don't have to buy all kinds of systems to deploy on the hub or remote side. And so it's a very easy way to get in. And so the early take rate, we've seen the military kind of mimicking the other market we have, right? The technology market on the cloud side. We've seen the military come into that network. We've seen a little bit of maritime activity in that business, super yachts and things of that nature, naval ships, those kind of applications. And then really the third market that's been adopted by the ZipNet network is the NGO market, and specifically education within the NGOs, whereby we can aggregate LEO traffic, GEO traffic, and then also put a educational application on the server so that they can reduce the amount of hardware used in the system. And that's important in places like Africa, whereby they need to use solar power and things like that. So we've had a take rate in the NGO sector, basically leveraging educational institutions. We have pretty drastically increased the number of POPs. We started with our initial POPs for ZipNet in the United States. So we have 3 major terminations in the United States for that. We've had that in Europe as well for quite some time. We've added a Tokyo POP because, some of our customers have tapped into Asia, so they want that. And Montreal, our home base. We've recently added Montreal as one of the nodes, and we fairly shortly will be adding Kenya because that's a major landing point for some of the new LEO products that are out there. So you might know in Africa, there's really only for Starlink 2 landing spots: Nigeria, which is saturated, and Kenya, which is the newest POP. So we're going to be locating a ZipNet POP there very shortly. So we're pretty excited about that. And then, we have some new technology in our ZipOS software that extends into ZipNet. Probably the most exciting one is called ZipAce, which is Application Classification Engine, a machine learning, artificial intelligence based system that will recognize traffic patterns and then classify it at the application layer. So we have new customers that are using that to classify rather than IP addresses and port numbers and things like that. And that's pretty exciting because then you can track which applications are in use and not only generate classification, but you can put some analytics in there. So we've released that product into the marketplace through ZipNet first, and then some of our technology customers that are not using the cloud service will utilize ZipAce in their networks to do application layer classification. And then another area that we've been active in the last 12 months is building up what we call our Leo Boost package. And so these are Leo specific features that are designed to allow Leo networks to operate more smoothly, right? Inter-satellite handoff delays being mitigated and packet drops being mitigated, congestion recovery, things like that we've always been able to do in our system. We've been able to apply that to Leo networks and then add a couple of new features that are very important. Leos are not as predictable. You might know, your customers know that there are wide variations in bandwidth from low to high on a continuing scale. It goes up and down. So we built some items in there to do packet duplication, it's called. And it basically allows very important information, like a good example would be signaling traffic for the cell backhaul networks has to get through no matter what. And so we would send a second or a third copy of a packet over the network and then pick the one that arrives first for higher reliability. And it's important to note that in that feature, we can do that on a very application-specific basis. So it's not always sending multiple copies of the packets only for that application, and the ones that are designated packets is a unique feature for XipLink. And then probably the other thing happening when you add the LEOs to the equation in hybrid networks is just the pure scale of these networks. So what we used to look at in geos is tens of megabits or 20 or 30 or maybe 100 megabits. A typical application now with hybrid is hundreds of megabits per second. And then when you look at many connections, then you need to scale to gigabits per second. And in our case, where we terminate many connections, we have to scale to tens of gigabits. So that's what we've been building recently, is scale into our product so that we can deal with the increasing capacity of all the network. So it's typical capitalism, right? The price goes down, the use goes up. And so more bandwidth is available, and then we have to do a couple of things. We have to manage that increase in bandwidth, and we also have to adapt our prices to be lower at higher bandwidth, which is another thing we've done recently. Kevin, thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Great to talk to you again.